Super duper. So welcome to everyone that's just dialing in. We're just going to give it a minute or two just to give people the opportunity to get off their last calls and on to this one. Looking forward to having this conversation today with you within a second. Hi to everyone that's just dialing in. We're just going to give it a minute to let everyone else get off their last calls and on to this one. We're really excited to be having this conversation with you today, so stay tuned. There is a number of ways actually you can engage with us. So in the chat function, you'll see us talking away in there today. So do feel free to share any thoughts or any questions that you might have actually as well. Second to that, we also have the Q&A function, which you'll notice is switched on. And again, you can ask us questions there. And if you like, you can ask anonymous questions as well. So feel free to communicate in both of those places. So let's give it another few seconds. The numbers are just gently going up there, but happy National Coming Out Day to everyone that's joining. And I've got Shrey on the line as well, who's my colleague in our Insights department that's going to be joining the conversation. Hi, Shrey.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. I work with LGBT Grid as an Insights and Content Analyst, and happy National Coming Out Day, because I think there's going to be like a very interesting conversation. But yeah, I'm very excited for it. Back to you, Matt.
Thank you. Great. Okay, let's sort of kick off. So a warm welcome to everyone that's dialing in. I know we've got a few new people that are due to join today as well. So what we're hoping to do is to give you a bit of an overview in terms of LGBT Great very quickly, a bit more about our organisational purpose and some of the programmes that we run across the industry. And then we're going to get into some really interesting conversation around coming out and looking specifically at some data points as to why this is really important. And we're also going to be considering as well, as we are in Black History Month, the intersection with race and ethnicity and mental health as well. So lots of big themes for today. I am joined by an amazing panel. So you're going to be hearing from Colette, Shona and Chris as we get into the panel discussion in about sort of 10-15 minutes time. And they're going to be sort of sharing some of their perspectives, their thoughts, their experiences on coming out themselves. And workshopping some of the themes as well. So if we just pop over to the next slide, Shiraz, what you can see here today, some of the themes. So really looking at what is coming out, what do we mean by that? Why is it still critically important today? I mentioned before the intersection with race, ethnicity, mental health, and then what we're aiming to do as well is to make this conversation as practical as we can, to actually give you some tips as well of what we can do to support others in the main, and thinking about what we can do as organisations as well. To ally and sort of support this community. So over onto the next slide there, what you can see is a bit more about LGBT Great. So we represent 50 sort of corporate organisations globally, with an employee reach around 600,000 people around the world. I guess a lot of our work is focused on creating safe spaces, bringing the sort of the thought leadership, providing data points as well, to enable our members and exec sponsors to make really informed decisions about how to really drive their LGBT plus DE&I journeys within their organisation. So, our vision is very much to become the most trusted place for LGBT talent, clients and investors within the industry. I think it's sort of worth pointing out as well is that we're starting to really attract support now from lots of different corners of financial services, and particularly sort of sectors that are supporting the industry as well. So we've welcomed our first law firm, our first technology platform. So super exciting. And we're looking forward to seeing that sort of continued growth and momentum of this brilliant community as we get into 2023. But I do want to take a sort of a few seconds just to talk you through what is it that LGBT Great actually does. And here on sort of the next slide, we've got a nice sort of little visual that will show you exactly what it is that we do. So the best way to think about LGBT Great really is around sort of three different areas. And the first is what we call insights. And this is the area of the organisation that Shiraz works in. And this is all about providing awareness, data, research, and enabling and equipping organisations and leaders with the right information that they need. We do a lot of work around organisational best practices as well. So all of our members get access to our global membership community, whether it's like sharing best practices around trans and non-binary policies, or it's looking at how do we navigate diversity data collection, how does that differ from country to country. We know there's lots of different sort of nuances sort of there as well. And secondly, around visibility, and this is a little bit where we're connecting today, we mark a number of visibility dates throughout the year. Obviously, National Coming Out Day is a large sort of LGBT date in the calendar. We do a lot of work around Pride, a lot of work around LGBT History Month, and increasingly actually looking at more intersectional areas of diversity and inclusion as well. And that's why mental health and well-being is such a key part of what we do. And then finally, this point around sort of community building and creating safe spaces, connecting organisations and LGBT talent together with senior sponsors across the industry. And actually on the next slide here, what you can see is that who some of our members are. So lots of different types of organisations in different places around the world. We went into COVID-19 in March 2020 with just 12 members. We now represent 50 organisations globally. So it really is an exciting time. And with the sort of proliferation of technology, what we've really been able to do is to reach more people, more vulnerable people in those places around the world where obviously being LGBT is a lot more difficult and a lot more complex. Now, National Coming Out Day is really important for a variety of reasons. And as much as it's designed to be a celebration of coming out, of individuality, of being proud, it's also very fair to say that for many people around the world, actually the thought of coming out is incredibly scary, and actually in some places around the world, a huge risk. So we are going to be sort of exploring, I think it's important we have a bit of a double-edged sword today in terms of how we think about coming out, and what we're aiming to do is to talk about both sides really in terms of that. I just want to share a sort of quick quote with you here and just workshop that for a moment. So the quote here from Sir Ian McKellen. So personally, coming out was one of the most important things I've ever done. Lifting from my shoulders the milestone of lies that I hadn't even realised I was carrying. Really powerful quote, and certainly that really does sort of resonate with me, right throughout my sort of teenage years and into early adulthood. There was this sort of overwhelming cloud of uncertainty and of fear about being very transparent and open and coming out about who you were. And I actually sort of linked that back to being, a child of sort of the Section 28 era, where conversations and visibility on LGBT identities and issues just was absolutely nil. And what we're trying to do is obviously create the level of psychological safety needed in organisations to give more people confidence. And actually to create that environment where people think, actually, I can be myself. And if I want to come out in the workplace and I want to be open, actually I can. And I think the other point today is that, coming out is very much a personal choice. And it's something that can't be forced and nor should be forced. And Shrey, I'll just bring you in there for a second. Do you want to sort of give us your perspectives on this quote from Ian? On what it might mean to you?
No, absolutely. I think, the idea that you have to hide your identity your entire life because everything is viewed through a heteronormative lens is it is always a burden on your shoulder. It is I resonate with the quote so much, and I completely agree. When I read this actually, I was like, I have to put this in the slide deck. Absolutely, I have to, because this speaks to me a lot, very loudly. I think it's very important that people actually be their true selves and be very comfortable with who they are, and they're not judged for who they are. Yes.
Absolutely. And sometimes, you don't realize, or I certainly didn't realize, that the level of, poor mental well-being, the anxiety, you weren't conscious around, I certainly wasn't conscious around mental health and well-being and the impact actually that trying to hide everything. And in a way being completely ashamed that you felt different to everybody else. So I think we definitely shouldn't underestimate the level of poor mental health and well-being actually that surrounds coming out and the process of. And of course, what we are seeing today, if we just pop over to the next slide, Shrey, what we can see here is just some of the latest LGBT themes that we're seeing really emerge sort of around the world today. And of course, it would come as no surprise to most folks on this call that we are seeing an unprecedented sort of backlash against trans and non-binary protections, a lot of hate in the media, very negative sort of stereotypes around gender identity, which are causing deep harm to the community sort of around the globe. The emergence of far-right politics has been something that we have seen play out considerably, really over the last sort of 5 years, of course, with the election of Trump and his administration in the US, and obviously lots of examples here in sort of Europe as well, and most recently, of course, with the election of Giorgia Meloni in Italy. So we know, coming out again in some places, very, very difficult. We're going to explore a little bit about why that is in a second. But it's worth pointing out as well, we're still operating in a world where, 69 countries around the world still illegal to be LGBT. And in 89 countries around the world, still punishable by death and in others imprisonment. So we know we are in an environment at the moment where there is a pushback against LGBT rights and protections, and actually therefore as organizations creating those psychologically safe spaces, making our allyship and our advocacy very clear has never been more important. So it's optimal timing, I think, to be having this conversation today. Shrey, anything you want to sort of build on in terms of LGBT trends around the world?
No, yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with you with the fact that this is not the best time to be very optimistic about where LGBT plus trends are going. I mean, even if you look at the map, you can see even in the United Kingdom, hate crimes have gone up 56% from previous year, only against transgender people, and we don't even have data for LGBT plus umbrella generally. So speaking to that, I mean, even where we live, we can see somewhat of a bad trajectory toward something that is not as optimistic and as not fulfilling. But then we can see, of course, as you mentioned, Italy, the soon-to-be prime minister, very concerning views, does not support LGBT plus adoption. Even just gender ideology is apparently a problem for Giorgia Meloni. So this, and I mean, I don't think I even have to go to Iran, because it's just, I think even viewing it from an intersectional lens where women, even if you're not LGBT plus, are being oppressed that much from the regime itself. I think being LGBT plus is the biggest challenge in areas like these. But there is some sort of a slight glimmer of hope, I'd say. For example, in Brazil, we know Jair Bolsonaro, again, very anti-LGBT plus, but then hopefully in the second round, there'll be more trans candidates running, and the 2 trans candidates have already been elected. And the highest number of trans candidates actually ran this year. So I think there's a lot of it going on, a lot of negativity, but there is a certain glimmer of hope, and that makes me positive at least. And of course, you can read all about this in our next digest issue. So please do feel free to peruse. But yeah.
Awesome, thanks, Shrey. I've had a sort of anonymous question come through around what do we think that the future is going to look like over the next sort of 2 years in terms of sort of LGBT trends around the world. I think we are going to continue to see in a lot of the Western parts of the world, despite being arguably the leaders in LGBT equalities, we're still going to see a continued negative discourse around I think trans and non-binary as the sort of the point around gender identity is still navigated, and I think lots of organizations at the moment as well, think about this in a business context, their main focus and resources at the moment are going into, have we got the right policies, processes in place for trans and non-binary folks. I do think that, as we look at the impact of Russia and sort of the Ukraine war, we've got here a very dictatorial, being described by some as a terrorist state, attacking, part of Europe and a democracy. Very different discourses here and belief systems in place around LGBT plus. So I think we're going to, continue to see that sort of, backlash against the other. We are sort of seeing an increasing number of people now actually join our community from Russia, and actually lots of people from Ukraine as well, looking for how can I move to the UK? Other employers out there that can help me with that. We actually came across somebody recently just on the border of Russia that was, very senior in a bank there, and have literally just had to uproot and move the whole family to the UK. So I think we're going to continue to see a big impact there. What we are seeing, of course, in lots of those countries where it is still illegal to be LGBT, whilst there is some progress, and I think we should note that, I think we are going to continue to see a lot of the cases like we're seeing out of Iran as well, with a real pushback on democracy, freedom of beliefs, conflict of religious ideology and LGBT identities, the conflict with traditional family values, etc. So I think we're going to see a lot of these themes continue to play out. I am very optimistic, and for those of you who know me, I'm forever the optimist, but I'm also a realist. So I think we need to continue to monitor what we're seeing around the world and really sort of think about what does that mean in terms of organisational best practice, etc. So just a couple of thoughts from me on that one. Keep those questions coming because I think they're really interesting. And Lauren, I know we've got you on the line today. If we could just launch the first poll question. Let's see if we can get everybody thinking, just to take our minds back to National Coming Out Day. So you will see a question in front of you in a moment. So in which year was the first National Coming Out Day celebrated? So do you think it was 92, 1985, 1988 or 1990? I'm just going to give you a few seconds just to cast your votes, and then we'll take a look at what you're saying. I guess National sort of Coming Out Day was founded by two people actually from the States, one a psychologist, a chap called Robert Inchberg, and then another lady called O'Leary, who was also a huge gay rights activist in the States. So this goes back quite a number of years now, but a few more votes just coming through. So in which year was the first National Coming Out Day celebrated? Was it 92, 1985, 1988, or 1990? So let's have a see what people are saying, Lauren. So just share the results with me. That'd be great. So the majority of you are saying 1988, followed by the majority are saying 1992, beg your pardon, followed by 1988, and then a tie with 85 and 1990. So that's quite interesting. The correct answer is actually 1988, is when it first got lift. So really interesting, came out sort of the gay rights movements and the feminism movement as well in the States, and really has sort of continued to gain traction around the world. The Human Rights Campaign now really pushes National Coming Out Day and do a lot of work with corporates and government in the US around this as well. And let's take a look at a quote, Shiraz, from Robert on sort of the next slide. So that most people think that they don't know anyone gay or lesbian, and in fact everybody does. It is imperative that we come out and let people know who we are, and disabuse them of their fears and their stereotypes. So one of the sort of the thinkings behind National Coming Out Day, of course, was making LGBT plus people more visible. And actually, one of the things that Robert believed in is that if the more people could, we could normalise LGBT identities to a greater extent, actually we would then be able to reduce the levels of stigma, stereotypes, fear. So it was designed, of course, with a positive sort of message. Shreyas, your thoughts on Robert's quote?
No, absolutely. I think this goes back to me always being like, of course, you have to empower yourself. And the moment that you come out and you disabuse them of their fears and stereotypes, I think this is like a very powerful line to me, because you're talking about how these stereotypes have to be completely shattered, and then you have to live in a society which is loving and accepting for everyone. So I think this quote again, and Robert Eichberg was the first person who like started the march of the in 1988. So I think he's like such a prominent figure in National Coming Out Day as a celebration. But yeah.
Awesome. I think absolutely sort of spot on, and maybe that ties us quite nicely into looking at some of the barriers, if you like, to coming out. And perhaps we just pop over onto the next slide. And these are some of the common things that we hear from LGBT talent around the industry, and basis with the data work and research that we've done. And quite interesting, actually, just on the chat function, everybody online, are you familiar with the sort of the phrase code switching? And are you aware of what that might mean? So I just want to give you a few seconds to think about that. But share your thoughts on the chat function in terms of what you think code switching might be. So we often see, of course, a greater proportion of people in those countries where, it is illegal to be LGBT, less likely to be out. We know that's the case as well in sort of the workplace across those places. So let me just put in the chat function there. What is code switching? I'm really interested to explore sort of this concept just very quickly. Essentially what we're looking at here is when we sort of change how we speak, the way we express our gender potentially, in terms of actually hiding behind our LGBT plus identities. So it's quite a common phraseology in sort of LGBT plus psychology. is that we tend to mask and hide behind our real identity, and that's connected to fear. So we see this play out a lot actually within the community, and indeed some of the others as well. So we've got a comment coming through here around changing behaviours to hide parts of you to fit in. Absolutely sort of spot on. Somebody else that's saying haven't heard of it. A few of you saying that actually. So yeah, code switching is quite a common phenomenon within the parts of the LGBT community that aren't out. Let's quickly move over on to the next slide. There's a few slides left, Trust, before we bring in the panel.
Yeah.
Good quote here from the Human Rights Campaign. So coming out in order to live openly isn't something you do once or even for 1 year. It's a decision that we make every single day of our lives. Bring this to life for us, Shiraz. What are your thoughts?
I think again, all of these quotes speak a lot to me, but the idea that once you come out, I think it's outside, like your identity was only inside you, and then is actually outside in the public. And I think that is very important. And again, and I think we did tackle this a bit, and we're probably going to tackle it again. But coming out again and again and again, I think the idea of only viewing every relationship as like a heterosexual cis-het relationship, or like just identity too, like that is also somewhat reductive. And I think we have to come out every day of our lives in terms of who we are, and own up to ourselves and empower ourselves. I think this, like, the quote speaks to me again. Like every quote, amazing.
Yeah, no, I completely agree actually. And for me, you know, there's been lots of different parts of my career where, you know, came out to the folks at home, came out at school, you know, came out when I got into the workplace. Then you end up having to come out again to clients, and the amount of clients that ask if you've got, you know, a wife or you've got children, all these sorts of things. And you know, everyone you meet, you end up doing this sort of several times, to the point now where I wear my LGBT Great badge when I go to meetings. I mean, it's a bit of a giveaway given that I'm sort of the MD of LGBT Great. But you know, there's lots of times where you find yourself having to really repeat this, and it's obviously really tiring. So important to point out, we don't just come out around our sexuality, but other areas as well. So one of the areas for me was actually connected to social mobility. When I first came to the city, had no contacts, spoke differently to other people. People always were quite interested. I got sort of asked if I was from Coronation Street quite a few times, which for those of you dialing in from around the world is a sort of a TV program that's filmed and based in the north, and people in the UK speak slightly different in terms of dialect and accent. So a lot of these things are quite stressful. If you just pop over onto the next slide, I just want to quickly run through this. We can see here that this point around sort of intersectionality, really, really powerful and important, you know, within the LGBT community. And what you can sort of see here in the middle is this sort of position and space of power. And the closer we are to the middle, so you can see here, if you're sort of heterosexual and you're white, you're closer to the center of power. If you're a gay man and white, again, you're still closer to the middle. But if you are black or from an ethnic minority background, and you're LGBT, you're right on the outside of the power wheel, and more marginalized than others. Pop over onto the next slide for me, Shiraz. Let's give everybody a bit of data. So you can see here, there's a real connection between coming out and our performance, the way that we feel within the workplace. So we know that, you know, as LGBT community and others, when we feel like we can be 100% ourselves, we're not hiding things, we're not code switching, we're not putting all that emotional effort into hiding stuff, we're going to be much freer to think, much more confident. So we know there's a direct correlation here between how we be at work in terms of performance. We know we experience better levels of mental health, lower levels of anxiety and depression and burnouts as well. But also this point around sort of LGBT youth, you know, we absolutely know that not being out when you're young, you know, living in families that potentially don't accept LGBT identity is really problematic for the community. And that ties me into my last slide now before we bring the folks in here. But you can see here, you know, coming out, it has an even greater impact for the experiences of Black LGBT plus people. Again, we are in LGBT History Month, Black History Month, with an LGBT lens, and really important that we recognise that there's some members of our community that need you know, lots of support, potentially in some instances more than others. But you can see here, you know, the experience of Black people, a big majority of the Black community are from a background which is deeply religious, and a lot of that sort of, you know, religious ideology and beliefs are enigma, if you like, anathema to LGBT plus identities, which causes a lot of what we call sort of social isolation, rejection from families. We know that the proportion of young Black LGBT talent as well are more likely to experience a poor mental health condition. And we know there's fewer safe spaces, despite those safe spaces having a direct impact on the level of suicide. So we know that, really clear sort of data points here. If we could stop sharing the screen, Shrey, and let's bring in the panelists. So Colette, Shona, and Chris. Let's pop your cameras on if that's okay, and give us all a wave. Cool, brilliant. And Chris, maybe if we can sort of, come to you first. I mean, just your reflections really on some of that data, and perhaps tell us a bit about, your experience of coming out or not.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. We've got a bit of echo here. I'm from an older generation, not too old, but older, like the kind of X generation. So I didn't really feel that in my day, and also being a late developer of gay, I didn't know I was gay until maybe my late 20s, got into my first man relationship in my late 20s. So quite a late starter. But I don't think I necessarily had an event as a coming out, which maybe the younger or the more woke generation had. For me, it was something that was quite hidden. It was quite something that was quite painful. As Matt said with the intersectionality data earlier, I'm from a Black Caribbean family. All my grandparents and below are members of Jehovah's Witnesses. So we had a lot of religion. I came from a very patriarchal, fatherly environment where what he said ruled the whole household. So I really couldn't be myself. I'm 46 years old now, and I'm still coming out daily. Half of my family know that I am gay, the other half I don't. Whether they assume it or guess it, whatever the reasons are, it's just much easier not to involve them in that, because first of all, I know they would hate it. I know a lot of people say, oh no, your parents would love you for who you are. Once you tell them, they will be fine. My mother's totally unbelievably supportive with it. My father, even if I go home on a weekend now, if something happens in the paper with Tom Daly or Elton John, he's literally on his high horse about how awful the gays are, how dirty the gays are. So for me, it's quite a painful area. I have a family that love me, but I have a family that won't support me or understand me. And I think that is always going to be something that causes trauma, because I've been brought up to realize it's a bad thing within my family circles. You generally tend not to love yourself. You always find that something inside that you can't fix, that's broken. And even if I was to come out for my dad, I know I would lose him as a father, which some people would say, well, that's his problem. He's the one that's treating you awfully. But as a son who loves his father and tolerates his father, I would rather not put him through that kind of pain, especially in his older years, Matt.
Sure. Well, look, thank you for sharing that. And I think it's a real portrayal, isn't it, of some of that data in real life, right? Real people, real things, real experiences. So I want to build on that in a second, but thank you for sharing it. Perhaps if we go over to Shona, just to get your perspectives on coming out and a bit about your journey.
Sure, and I echo the pieces that you're continuously coming out. As someone who's even just started with a new company after 12 years, I feel like I'm coming out every day at the moment. So it's kind of, after spending 12 years somewhere else where everybody knew who I was, it's started again, very prevalent, and I work in a global role, which makes things even more complex with the type of some of the countries that I work within. But going back to my story, I'm the same generation as Chris. No one, where I grew up in a small town in Scotland, there was no gay people. Now, I know we all know that's not true. In later life, I know there certainly wasn't. Some of my close male friends came out, but at that point there was no visibility at all. And it took me, I was very late in life when I came out. I didn't come out till I was in my late 20s. And then it was with, I was essentially outed by friends. They asked me direct questions, but it took a long time for me to come out with my family. I'm with my current wife for, I think, 6 years. We lived together in different locations throughout the world, and I still hadn't told my parents. So I came out very late. I think I was in my, or to me, pretty late, in my early 30s before I eventually and was in a long-term relationship before I eventually told my parents. And that wasn't through fear of rejection. It was, I really didn't know how they would take it. I knew they would always love me, but I really didn't know. And I had a wonderful experience, and listening to Chris's story just really like honed in on how fortunate I was. And what I found is that the story reverted to, why didn't you tell us? It inherently went back to the people that I was surrounded by, and how they felt about it, and why I didn't tell them. And funnily enough, my dad doesn't mention it, but he still walks me down the aisle. But we don't talk about it. My mum is the person that is in the card shops arguing with the people at the counter to why they don't have daughter and her wife cards. So, and they knew, in their eyes, they know nobody else who's gay, and they never knew anybody who was gay. So they still believe that, but it essentially, so.
Really interesting. I mean, fascinating stories, and I'm sure your story will resonate with lots of other folks as well on the line, and indeed, of course, other parts of sort of the community. I think this point around trigger points for actually having the conversation, we do quite often see that it is because of a relationship or a long-term relationship, which then gives you the stimulus to go, actually, I need to do this. I think the point you make around not necessarily fear of rejection, but fear of the unknown maybe was a bit of a delaying factor. And I think that's something that we do tend to see a lot of. Really want to build on some of those points as well. Colette, if we just pop over to you, tell us about, I mean, I know all about your story, and for everyone on the line, actually, Colette's one of our lead role model ambassadors. So hello and welcome, but tell us a bit about your journey, your story.
Thanks, Matt. And yeah, very similar to Shona, I came from a very small village in Ireland and didn't know any other gay people, but I always felt different. And looking back, I really relied on sport actually when I was quite young to take me away from my thoughts. I would sort of say, give me freedom, because I always felt, I think I was judged a lot about what I wore, how I wanted to wear things, and I definitely didn't want to wear dresses and things. I just wanted to wear sport. But at school, it was very gender stereotypical type thing, and boys played football and girls did Irish dancing, and I did Irish dancing, but fortunately enough for me, my Irish dancing teacher was a competitor of the school Irish dancing teacher, so I got out of that and played football. But I think my first coming out experience is really with a couple of my best friends. When actually playing football, it was very, men and women played at the same time as playing for the county team. We were treated exactly the same, and the whole community can come out and support us. But obviously I was starting to move into that space around dating boys, and I really didn't want to date any, especially my male friends. They were just my friends to me. I didn't have any attraction to them whatsoever. But I got into this bit of a tricky dilemma where my friend said, actually, this guy wants to ask me out on a date type thing. And I thought, oh, crikey, I'm going to have to get out of this some way. And it gave me a lot of anxiety, really. How am I going to have a conversation about this? I don't know who I am, really. I didn't have any experiences, but I would have to have that conversation at some point. But I thought I got out of it, because actually the evening we went out, I could see this guy having a conversation with my best friend, and I thought, this is brilliant, best situation ever. Don't have to have the conversation. They're just going to get together at some point, and this will be fine. Anyway, they didn't, and I really, I guess what hit me that evening was this support that females have for one another, because she said to me later in the evening, oh, are you going to go on a date with John? And I went, oh, I thought I got out of this. I had 10 seconds of going, really, this shouldn't be happening right now. And I eventually thought, I'm going to have to tell them that I don't like him like that. And actually, I thought we two have a connection. Anyway, I was quite brave, but I actually, for those 10 seconds, I thought I was going to lose my best friends, because they would see me differently. They wouldn't want to be friends with me anymore. And that was it. That judgment, that fear of losing those people was definitely there. But I did. And I said to them, I think I might be gay, but I don't know what to do with that. And straight away they said, don't worry, it's okay. We're here for you, and we're in this together. I went, oh, thank God, relief. And I went, oh, by the way, are you not going to go on a date with John? Because you definitely should get together. Anyway, long story short, they got married. So they fell in love, got married, and I thought, well, thank God for that. I definitely did.
One less pressure for you. Yeah.
Less pressure. But fast forward there in terms of career, I I quickly moved to Dublin and moved to London, that escapism was there too. How would I get away to find myself? And I wanted to be away from home, because I felt trapped, right? But actually I never came out for the first 10 years of my banking career. And I don't think that was probably the environment that said you couldn't, but I didn't know anybody else. There was no visibility, etc. And the first time I came out was really when I went into asset management. And the one conversation that triggered it was my new manager taking the team to team lunch and then saying, Colette, do you have a partner? And I honestly thought for 5 seconds when this term partner is completely different to someone saying, do you have a boyfriend? Do you have kids, like you said, Matt? And I felt I could actually talk about my partner at that stage, which was a complete relief. I felt so energized. I felt part of the team and no judgment. So yeah,
it's interesting, isn't it? Like the difference with like one word, one piece of language can ultimately make you go, okay, I feel a little bit safer here than I did before. And when we come on to some of the organizational tips actually and things that we can do, we always talk a lot about language. But Chris, I wonder if we might come back to you and just to sort of build a little bit on, you talked about, you've had on one half, a positive experience, but then on another half, all of that data around, this sort of balance against traditional religious, cultural, family beliefs and values, which has been very difficult for you. I wonder whether you might be comfortable enough to share a bit about, actually what impact has that had on you?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I don't want to paint the worst story ever. Most of my family are okay with it, but the ones that aren't are very not with it. I'm still very quite a tight family member. I see my family a lot. I just choose not to involve them in this side of me. For example, my father, he worked on London transport for like 40 years. So 40 years on the buses along many different routes around London. Every passenger possible would have been on that bus. When we do have very high level conversations, you probably would have had a gay person on your bus at some stage during that 40 years. Instantly, like a Little Britain kind of character who'd be like, not on my bus. He's always in and out of the hospital, gay nurses that are male that you can obviously see could be gay, camp, feminine, confident, their authentic self. And you'd be, oh, your nurse is gay. No, not my nurse. So it's a really kind of funny, but also sad thing at the same time, because he's just not programmed to accept that in any form, not just his son being gay, but anyone around him, and it drives wider conversations. Well, there's no one else in our family, or we don't have any gays in our family. My family's huge. So it's a really weird understanding about it. But I mean, as an individual, I think I'm quite a strong person, and having organizations like this in my later life, there's lots of support, there's lots of other networks, there's lots of other people that have been through similar, or people that you can reach out to. So from that point of view, I'm pretty self-sufficient. I understand what I have at home, I understand what I don't have, I just work with it and deal with it. It's a part of life. You're not going to please anyone and everyone in every walk of life, so you just deal with it. But at the same time, it's very hard to be loved by someone, but they also hate a part of you as well. And I think that's probably the most difficult part for me. If I ask my father for money, if I ask him for a roof over the head, he would instantly give it to me. The fact that he doesn't officially want to know, or for me to tell him, is the difference maker here. And that's sad, because that will never change.
Yeah, and it's a case of two extremes, isn't it? Which must be really, in terms of emotionals and well-being, they're really hard to navigate. Because one part of you's content and happy, the other part of you is struggling with that relationship with your dad. And I think we hear a lot of these stories, particularly with people from Black and ethnic minority backgrounds. It's really common, but I think a lot of these stories are often untold, and I think we've got to really think about how we make them visible. So if there are other folks in the community, that 50% of young Black LGBT folks that have considered a suicide attempt or experienced a poor mental health condition, that actually they're not alone as well. Shona, I wonder whether you want to build on any of sort of Chris's or Colette's points.
I think one of the biggest things for me is like that release that you feel when you do come out. And I think it's just important for somebody like myself and Colette and Chris, who have probably spent many years not out, and then you're in these work situations where you are being asked these questions, that sense of relief I know even for just telling my immediate family, everybody in the world knew, but I still had them sworn to secrecy because my parents didn't know, but everybody knew. But that relief when I had eventually told my parents was immense. But now it just becomes easier. And I just want to get that across, that it does become easier. But I think it was more back to Shreya's point earlier, where he was saying the quote where you come out every day. It is so important to understand that this isn't a once done, you're done. It just gets easier and you become more, I don't know, I certainly became more proud and confident of who I am. And actually people I find now are much more considerate of the language they use than they were 10, 15 years ago. I mean, it is very rare. Well, it's not rare. You still get asked. I still get asked if I have a husband, if I have a family, and it doesn't matter. The family thing doesn't matter. Of course, you could still have a family. I just don't. But you tend to find, especially the younger generation, are very considerate of the language that you use. The biggest challenge I have is more global now. I am now dealing with different parts of the world that are not so advanced.
Open-minded.
But yeah, everything Chris and Colette said really resonated with me, and having kind of similar experiences to them.
Yeah, no, I think, again, really good points. And I think this point around it does become easier. I can definitely empathise with that one. And thinking back now, I think, goodness, what I went through emotionally, did I really need to go through that? And what I try and think about is what would have made it different for me. And actually, I think it's this point, isn't it? And anyone on the line today that is not out, thinking of coming out, my biggest tip for you is make sure you've built a really solid network around you of friends, people that have got you back. And if you haven't got that, then get in touch with us and we can put you in touch with some people, etc. Colette, let's pop back over to you just to sort of see if you want to build on any of Chris's and sort of Shona's points.
I just reflect on what you just said, Matt. I think you find a lot of great friends, and across, I guess the first firm I came out in and across the industry, I call them friends now because you form this connection straight away. You've got commonality around lived experiences, the sort of fears of coming out, but actually, the great bonds that you create straight away, and those are people that help you navigate your personal and professional journey. And have helped me so much over the last few years. So I think when I came out, as Shona said, it got easier because definitely with my colleagues and my stakeholders, I quickly started to know other LGBT people and realize you've been working with them for 3-4 years, and you feel that's such a lost opportunity as well. But the relationships you have with them are much stronger. They're typically based on trust. You get involved in different projects, and you're collaborating very, very differently in the work environment as well. And it's just that expression of who you are, and actually also being able to not just talk about work all the time, but have those conversations about your weekend and go for some drinks and socialize. You just create really great bonds. So I definitely feel that my career went in a completely different direction. Well, firstly, I ended up in D&I because I was actually in resourcing when I first came out as LGBT, and got involved with the LGBT network, and then went into a broader D&I role. And a lot of that I thought, actually, what can I give to the community as well? Because actually I didn't have a lot of experiences, but actually those connections of the LGBT community help you navigate the challenges together, because as long as you've got different identities, different perspectives, I think you can definitely go on that journey. But it's a positive place, and definitely during COVID times, Matt, in particular with you, you're one of the people that really helped me. I was living on my own. You talk about LGBT communities getting isolated. You came for walks with me and things, the things that really helped us navigate that. So I'm sure a lot of others in this community have probably similar experiences, but I definitely realize as well the impact on my mental health, anxiety. When moments make you really anxious, actually the community is there just to get you through it, and to help you on your way as well, personally and in the workplace.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most brilliant things about the LGBT community globally, is it yes, there's obviously different points of view, there's different identities, sometimes there's conflict, but actually the one thing that does bind us all together is that we all face challenges, right? No matter what, at some point of our life, based on our identity. And in many instances, we're pushing an open door. People need help. The LGBT community is so good at sort of letting people in and connecting people and sponsoring one another. And of course, we talk about sponsorship, of course, in organizations, but actually within the community, if you are an LGBT person or somebody that's LGBT that needs a little bit of help, we've got a really cool mentoring program that connects young LGBT folks with senior business folks, sometimes LGBT, sometimes allies. And again, if you're interested in getting involved in that, or dipping your toe in the water, you can get in touch with Lauren, who runs that program for us, Lauren Cahill. So by all means, take a look at that. Perhaps, Chris, if we just circle back to you, just for sort of the last 5 minutes of the combo today, and some of the themes, or one of the themes that we wanted to talk about today was, what advice would we give to others that are thinking of coming out? Obviously, we've talked about this point around, build a community around you. But is there anything else that you can think of based on your lived experience that could be really helpful in terms of a tip to others?
Yeah, I think in the modern generation, we have programs, network like this, and National Coming Out Days and Pride Month. So there are things that make it seem much more easier to come out. I think sometimes maybe people fall for that. It's Pride Month, it's National Coming Out Day, I should do it. I think you should assess your surroundings, your family, your support network also, but also don't feel pressure to have to come out. If it doesn't feel right for you at this time, don't do it. There will be a time when it will feel comfortable, you want to do it. Please wait for that time, because obviously when you rush into things or feel pressured into it, you often don't get the outcomes you want to. So I would just urge anyone who feels that way, talk to some organizations, talk to people that you trust, and only come out when you feel comfortable. And I think that's the best advice.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant, actually. And what I really took away from that is this point around getting yourself as confident as you can, as physically possible, around it before you take a move. And I think there's various ways that you can do that with the community, maybe through mentoring, maybe through connecting with other people that are like you, etc. But I think that's a really brilliant point. Yeah, awesome. And perhaps, Shona, if we just go over to you in terms of any tips that you might be able to give to people dialing in.
Well, my tip is exactly the same as Chrissy's. Do it in your own way, in your own time. There is no pressure to do anything. Like, absolutely exact same thoughts. If you feel you need to do it, then there is an element of bravery at one point. I think each time that especially in the beginning, when I started doing it, I was kind of coerced into doing it. Or I was put in a situation where if I didn't tell, someone else was going to tell, which is an awful place to be in. But in a way, it gave me the little bit of a nudge that I needed, because I wanted to do it. I just wasn't brave enough. So yeah, find the right time for you. Everyone's situation is different. Don't feel pressurized. And one of the points I would say is really lean on the community. The reason it took me so long to come out is because I thought I was the only gay person in the world. And life is not like that anymore. There is so many networks and so many people you can lean on who are willing to share their stories. And you create your own story. Your story won't be the same as everyone else's. Everyone's got a different story to tell, and that's okay. But just also be conscious that it's not over and done with once. It's a journey, and you will be on that journey for the rest of your life, but the journey ain't bad once you're out there. So
I think really brilliant points again. I think this sense of community, this sense of confidence, taking your time. I think coming out is a very personal thing. It's a very personal choice to come out. I think one of my tips would be actually, for what my tips are worth, is that I came out in stages. So I had two best friends at school, Ruth and Jonathan. Told them first because I knew I could tell them anything. And then 3 or 4 months later, I then got the confidence I needed from them to go, better talk about my mum about this, better tell my girlfriend. And then from there on in, I built the confidence over another 3 or 6 months before I then told everybody, that I worked within the hotel part-time in Blackpool, that I was also part of the community as well, and they said we knew that already. So you can sometimes build it up in your mind, but of course everyone's experience is different. I've had quite a few friends in Preston actually, part of the Pakistani community, that had a horrendous experience, and to the point where one turned up on my doorstep once and had literally been thrown out. So I think it's do take your time, do think it through. There's different challenges for different people, but building as much sort of confidence and sort of mental resilience, and I think always have a plan B. That would have been really good for me back in the days. Think about, if this all doesn't go right, what's my plan? And I think building that level of self-confidence, I think, is important. Colette, let's bring sort of you back in just for sort of our final tip of the day.
Yeah, look, a couple of things I would just add to that is around when you said about lean on the community. I think it's important as well, as you're reflecting on why you want to do this. For a lot of people, they're safe places in the workplace, and for some it's at home. And so, you talk about coming into the workplace, not coming out, but actually maybe cultural barriers, etc. The ethnicity stats are really, really shocking actually, and quite heartbreaking really. But for some people, that community in the workplace is safe. So always recognize, I think, when you're coming out, just create those boundaries, I think, around what that means for you, how you want to take it. If it's just one person, and it's one more than you've told yesterday. So just build it up from there. And then the other thing I would just say is just the LGBT community ourselves need to be better as well with one another when coming out, because a lot of assumptions are made about identities and actual gender identity, etc. So our own language is really important when people are coming out. And I've heard a lot of stories about people around the table being asked to sort of share their identities, and some that I thought the LGBT great talk on bi-visibility was really important, because a lot of people resonated with how hard it is to come out about being bisexual, etc. So I think we as a community also as well should really work with one another and be better as well at language around LGBTQ identities.
Brilliant. I think that nicely summarizes everything together. And perhaps if I can end it on an optimistic and positive sort of note, is that within organizations, within businesses now, LGBT agendas, DE&I agendas are front and centerpiece in many businesses. So it's a good time to be at work. Never thought I'd say that. And do find, seek out those people, lean on the community, find those people that you can connect with, find those people that are talking about LGBT. If you don't want to talk about it, maybe join a network and listen in. There's lots of things that you can do. And by all means, feel free to contact any of us on sort of the call today. I'm sure we would be all willing to point you in the right direction if you need an ear or need a little bit of a bit of a destination to get to. We're all happy to help you with those things. Huge thank you to you panelists. I could have spoken to you all individually probably for at least a day on this exact topic, and we will be bringing more sort of stories telling and coming out stories as well in 2023 as we build a brand new series. Watch this space. And yeah, we will follow up with a copy of the video recording, which we do tend to see a lot of people watch back actually in all of our member firms. So yeah, thanks very much for everybody dialing in, and happy Coming Out Day and happy Black History Month. Thanks a million.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Shreyas.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Everyone.